There's been a shocking turn of events in Russia and the war in Ukraine over this past weekend. We're not out of the woods yet. Putin may have lost control of his highly equipped, war-hardened, prison-recruited private military group, the Wagner Group. Or has he? A potential coup that began Friday appears to have fizzled out by Saturday, and Putin appears to have gone into hiding, but not before losing 39 pilots and Russian crew members, possibly even a general to the Wagner Group. Russia temporarily lost control of the vital headquarters and resupply railway terminals and lines at the Rostov-on-Don. At least one Russian member of the parliament and Kremlin propagandist was calling for the execution of leaders of the Wagner Group, who have apparently been offered immunity from prosecution and permanent sanctuary in exile in Belarus. And that all came after the Russian intelligence agency, the SFB, allegedly threatened to exterminate their families. So what's going on precisely, and is it over now? And more importantly, what's coming next? Let's try to make sense of it all, separate the propaganda from the facts, and better understand how this might reshape the conflict moving forward in Ukraine, along with the new risk it creates for the West. I'll also announce the winner of our last giveaway and let you know how you can enter to be the winner of our next prepping giveaway. What happened? On Friday, the general of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, an oligarch whose wealth is said to exceed $1 billion, he marched his troops to the Rostov-on-Don in Russia and began moving toward Moscow in an apparent coup attempt. I ask everyone to get out of our way. Those who try to stop us, we will consider them a threat and destroy them immediately, he said. This is not a military coup, it's a march for justice. We've been covering the Wagner Group and Prigozhin extensively in our news segments. In a nutshell, it's Putin's Kremlin-funded private military group that allows him to circumvent and skirt around the established rules of war to torture civilians and commit atrocities while keeping his hands clean. Prigozhin frequently criticizes the standing Russian military, its leadership, and the leaders of Russia for being soft, ineffective, incompetent, and traitors to Mother Russia. Now, the group has been fired upon by Russian soldiers while retreating from Bakhmut and has seemingly been on the edge of mutiny for months now. Now, this occurred on Friday as Prigozhin steered his forces toward Russia and advanced them toward Moscow. And it's estimated that about 8,000 of the 25,000 troops under his command were the primary column of troops heading to Moscow. Now, that would seem to lend credence to a faction loyal to Prigozhin and a more significant amount of the Wagner forces unwilling to challenge Putin in Moscow. And by noon, they had seized the Russian military headquarters in the Rostov-on-Don. By 4 p.m., they had advanced to the Lipetsk region, 250 miles from the southern edge of Moscow. Now, residents along the route reported clashes between the Wagner Group and the Russian military and air defenses. Local authorities swiftly mobilized to impede the convoy's progress in the northern regions, employing various tactics. They used school buses and trucks that were strategically positioned to obstruct the roads, while heavy machinery appeared on the highway, actively creating breaches in the asphalt. Serving as a crucial defensive barrier for the capital, the Okhova River, running through the region just south of Moscow, had its bridges blocked by military forces. Then, suddenly, a deal was struck. Prigozhin announced on his Telegram channel that in the space of 24 hours, we have gone as far as 200 kilometers away from Moscow. Now is a moment when blood could be spilled. To avoid this, we are turning our convoy around. Now, concurrently, the presidential office of Belarus, a staunch ally of Putin, released a statement indicating significant developments. And throughout the day, Alexander Lushenko, acting at Putin's behest, negotiated with Prigozhin, culminating in an agreement. As per the deal, Wagner would withdraw to its bases in eastern Ukraine. Prigozhin would relocate to Belarus. Prigozhin called for firing Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who allegedly ordered Russian troops to attack Wagner Group camps, resulting in extensive casualties. As is a common SFB tactic, Wagner's leadership had their families threatened as well. And by Sunday morning, Wagner had crossed out of Russia and back into occupied Ukraine. Little sign was left of the coup. And whether it was threats to his fortune, his family, the refusal of support from forces deeper in Russia, or faced with overwhelming odds and uncertain destruction, we likely will never know the reason for Prigozhin's surrender. Many of the soldiers in his command felt betrayed, and they will take that feeling of betrayal with them as they are absorbed into the regular Russian army deployed in Ukraine. And after listening to many analysts who have had years of experience monitoring Russian activity, very little of this made sense to them. It creates more questions than it does answers, which leads us to our next point. The turning point in the war? So, was this a turning point in the war in Ukraine? The unfortunate answer is probably not. It certainly had the potential to be, but hopes of that evaporated by Sunday evening. We were initially monitoring this as a potential ruse to draw in Ukrainian forces into awaiting Russian defenses or as a means to rapidly relocate personnel under the guise of a coup. Still, it really does appear that a coup was occurring and has been disbanded now. We were also looking at it as a means to relocate Wagner forces to Belarus with the intention of turning them on Kiev, but it doesn't appear the forces are going into Belarus, just Prigozhin, a few of his key leaders, and probably some personal security forces. We try and look at this from every angle because Putin is crafty and Prigozhin is ruthless. Ukraine, they seized upon this disarray and stepped up the tempo and severity of its attacks on the Russian-occupied positions, but didn't really make much progress on that front. Putin used forces in Russia rather than trying to scramble forces deployed in Ukraine. Perhaps he couldn't muster for deployed forces in time and was forced to rely upon the military that he had remaining in Russia. So, by Monday, not much had really changed except that the Russian fighting forces were a bit weaker and conflicted. Putin has suffered an ego and public loss for which he will ramp up his brutality to try and show that he's still in control. And we know that the internal pressures to overthrow Putin and end this conflict are not strong enough to accomplish a leadership change. Analysts speculate that the coup attempt may have weakened Russia's front line. And U.S. Secretary of State Blinken acknowledged that the armed uprising in Russia exposed cracks in Putin's authority, posing significant questions. The impact of the Wagner mutiny on the Ukrainian battlefield remains to be seen. And at the same time, the Kremlin announced plans to incorporate non-participating Wagner soldiers into the Russian Defense Forces, offering amnesty to those involved in the coup. And furthermore, threats have been issued against Prigozhin by members of Russia's convict army, accusing him of betrayal. At stake is a war in Ukraine, the future of Russia, and most importantly, the fate of Russia's nuclear arsenal. And at the time of recording this video on Monday, June 26, President Putin has not been seen in public since his Saturday address. However, a pre-recorded interview aired on Sunday where Putin expressed his confidence in realizing plans for the special military operation in Ukraine. When that was recorded remains a question. Reports suggest that the United States knew about a possible Wagner Group mutiny. And the U.S. and much of the world, of course, have serious concerns about Putin's control over the nuclear arsenal if a complete coup were to take place. Russia possesses nearly 6,000 nuclear warheads, the world's largest stockpile of nuclear warheads, even greater than the US and China's arsenal. What to watch for? Integrating the Wagner forces into the regular Russian army will not be a smooth transition. Many from the Wagner group feel betrayed by Prigozhin in Russia, and many were recruited directly out of prisons where they were serving long sentences for murder and other horrible crimes. And none of these Wagner soldiers will be spending time in the lap of luxury in the resort city in Belarus, where Prigozhin is. They may also be reluctant to exchange their high-quality, Kremlin-funded weaponry for old, hardly functioning Soviet-era Kalashnikovs. Wagner forces deployed in other places like Sudan, Libya, Central Africa, or Mali, they may remain loyal to Prigozhin and will be choked off from Kremlin support. It's been very openly known that Prigozhin has long smuggled natural resources, including gold, diamonds, oil, and other natural resources that clandestinely fund his operations and line his and Putin's pockets. Now, the Wagner Group is a highly equipped criminal operation that also wages a little war here and there. And with the retreat from prominence around the globe, we may see a regular Russian army deployed in Africa or a strategic repositioning of forces across Africa. One thing is for certain, covert operations and clandestine forces from other countries will seek to destabilize further Wagner operations where they can to keep Moscow off balance. It's also not exactly clear the terms of the deal. The criminal charges of mutiny may or may have not been dropped against Prigozhin. He may or may not willfully give up control of his forces. We do know that he enjoys his vaulted position and may not wish to simply give that up and merely retreat to the Belarusian countryside. As they say in Russia, as much as you feed a wolf, it will still be eyeing the forest. Could at least some of the Wagner troops being assimilated into the regular Russian army still be loyal to him and will simply wait for his future orders? Who will ultimately be punished for the insurrection? And how will that play out in the opinions of the Russian people and the Russian military? A video posted online by the Wagner prison-turned-fighters accused Prigozhin of cowardice, saying his supporters had been double-crossed and now faced retribution. One of his Stormzy soldiers could be heard saying that Prigozhin had promised everything to them and then turned the steering wheel in the other direction. We can expect Putin to clean a little house by eliminating anyone remotely associated with the coup attempt. We can also expect him to attempt to assert himself dramatically on the world stage to show that he is still in control and as strong as ever. Prigozhin, who has positioned himself as an anti-establishment figure, is widely popular among the Russian people, especially in St. Petersburg, where he comes from. In a survey conducted by the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, Prigozhin emerged as the fifth most esteemed figure living among Russians. The survey asked, are there any Russians who make our country proud or not? Prigozhin garnered a higher ranking than Shoigu and government officials, but remained below Putin, military personnel, Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. This indicates that Prigozhin enjoys a considerable level of popularity within the country. How much of that popularity will turn to dissent against Putin or contempt toward Prigozhin will remain to be seen. Still, I would expect internal conflicts in Russia to rise and be stoked by covert Ukrainian operations. We could wait around forever to see Putin succumb to internal division, however. But more important to watch will be shifting on the battlefield, dissent or a lack of willingness to fight on the Russian side, and minor incidents of insurrection and sabotage. It's safe to say that this weekend's coup will result in multiple fires that Putin and the Kremlin will attempt to snuff out as aggressively as possible before they spread uncontrollable bonfires of rebellion. If enough minor events occur and there is a lack of will to fight on the part of Russian soldiers, Ukrainian forces may be able to reclaim chunks of their territory and will appear to be turning the tide of the war. Giveaway. For this week's giveaway, we're going to be giving away a set of fire blankets. And to be eligible for a chance to win, just simply post a comment below, click the thumbs up icon, and in the following video, I'll use a tool to draw the winner from the comments on this video randomly. And here's the important part. I'm not going to reach out to you unless your name shows on the screen. I keep getting, unfortunately, individuals that reach out that have been spammed by different, people saying that you're the winner and just message us. That's not me. Unless your name shows on the screen, it's not me. Now, the last video's winner of the PD100 Full Face Organic and Particulate Respirator is Colin Evans. Congratulations. I'm going to reach out to you shortly to get that sent to you. What we can expect moving forward. We can expect an even more dangerous and unpredictable Russia moving forward. There remains quite a few unknowns at this time, and it's safe to say that a coup was at least temporarily avoided, but it is far from being completely over. There has been an increased tempo of activity of NATO aviation over the Black Sea, and this tends to be reconnaissance informing Ukraine's ground forces. We can deduce from that an increase in Ukrainian offensive maneuvers in the coming days. We have also already seen Russian Su-27 intercepts over the Black Sea, so a conflict exploding in this area is an increasing probability. We can expect to see even more apparent incidents of sabotage, like the recent explosion of military warehouses in Crimea. We can expect the savvy Ukrainian forces to string together a few victories out of the chaos as well. Anti-terror security measures are still in place in Moscow, with sites like the capital's Red Square closed to the public. It's possible this coup has simply turned away from Moscow, but is still moving full steam ahead in other directions. As U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said on Sunday, I don't think we've seen the final act. We've seen more cracks emerge in the Russian facade. It's too soon to tell exactly where they go and when they get there. But certainly we have all sorts of new questions that Putin is going to have to address in the weeks and months ahead, Blinken told NBC's Meet the Press program. Now, my personal assessment, while it appears a coup has turned away from capturing Moscow, I don't think it's entirely over. You can expect things to remain murky at best. You can expect Putin to do something drastic enough to shock the world to try to keep his position as a strongman. Prigozhin is even more extreme than Putin in many ways, so living in a post-Putin world may be even more dangerous than our current world. Whoever replaces Putin will need the backing of the oligarchs, and they just want to get back to making money. Mostly, they don't support Prigozhin, but will now view Putin as less effective at protecting their interests in the future. It is possible that Putin may jump on the world's bandwagon by trying to marginalize and scapegoat Prigozhin as a war criminal and traitor in the hopes that it will diminish Prigozhin's status at home. And it's unclear whether Putin is even in Moscow now, while Prigozhin has not been seen since he abandoned his assault on the capital. Garry Kasparov, the chess champion who has become one of the foremost leaders of the Russian democratic opposition, he said, "A dictator relies on his aura of invincibility. Many of Putin's top officials ran for cover. Even Putin himself appears to have fled the city. In the face of humiliation, Putin will want to escalate his aggression to sow fear in the world and solidify his iron grip on control. So, brace for something shocking from Putin and the Kremlin in the coming weeks. If Putin wants to pause a war in place for a bit while he cleans house and regroups, we could see even more shelling in Zaporizhzhia, a potential nuclear sabotage disaster, or some similar crisis. the world should also brace for a showing of the no limits partnership between Putin and China's leader Xi. Any escalation of the conflict in the South China Sea will be a welcoming distraction for Putin to take the scrutiny off his own public failures. In the coming days and weeks, we're either going to see Xi Jinping retreat from the support of Putin or escalate a conflict on his behalf. And currently, he's decrying the use of the private military groups like Wagner. We're going to continue to monitor this ongoing coup for you, as we don't think it's over yet. And I wouldn't hold my breath if you were hoping for a speedy conclusion to this world conflict. Instead, you might want to do something more practical and watch my video on why this world war may drag on for quite some time and what the world leaders aren't telling you about it. In that video, I'll also tell you what you can do to protect yourself from the effects of this ever-escalating, never-ending conflict. As I always say at the end of these videos, so much is happening and it only seems to escalate by the day. Again, I don't look at these events as something that scares me. I always want to be up to date so I can be informed as to what I should be preparing for or if I need to alter how I prepare. And that's my hope for you and my encouragement as well. Don't allow this to put you in fear. This message is not the news that I list out. It's not about scaring you, but it's about informing you to hopefully, again, educate you so you know how to prepare. If you have any feedback or any thoughts, feel free to post that below. And as always, stay safe out there.